In Ecuador, the Parliamentary Legislative Administration Council demanded that the commission processing the impeachment trial against President Guillermo Lasso comply with the established rules and deadlines. In Colombia, authorities declared a state of public calamity before a possible eruption of the Nevado del Ruiz volcano. And in China, the armed forces began military exercises in maritime and airspaces near the island of Taiwan to protect its sovereignty. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Ecuador, the Parliament's Legislative Administration Council demanded that the commission handling the impeachment trial against President Guillermo Lasso comply with the established rules and deadlines so as not to hinder the process. The council met virtually to analyze the status of the impeachment proceedings against the head of state, whose notification had been delayed in the Oversight Commission. The resolution urged the president of the commission to avoid using an ordinary procedural regulation that is outside and not foreseen within the parliamentary procedures. Furthermore, the Legislative Administration Council asked social sectors to be vigilant in the Commission's actions so that legal security is not undermined and the Constitution is not violated. The federal government announced on Friday the return of Brazil to the Union of South American Nations, UNASUR, in a decree signed by President Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva. After being published in the official Gazette of the Union, the provision will become effective as of May 6. In 2019, the defeated President Jair Bolsonaro communicated through social networks that Brazil would withdraw from the bloc, founded from a constitutive treaty signed in May 2008 by the governments of Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Guyana, Paraguay, Peru, Suriname, Uruguay, and Venezuela. On Friday, a U.S. court annulled the arrest warrant for former Peruvian President Alejandro Toledo, who could now be extradited to his country to answer charges of alleged money laundering. The arrest warrant for former President Alejandro Toledo has been suspended for 14 days by a California judge. The measure comes after a court of appeals in the United States submitted on Thursday the request of Toledo's defense to delay the extradition for 2 weeks. In Cuba, 2 workers were injured, 1 died, and 1 remains trapped after an accident at the Antonio Guterres thermoelectric power plant in Matanzas province. The event occurred around 2 p.m. local time inside a chimney when a 7-meter-high partition wall made of refractory bricks collapsed, striking 4 operators who were cleaning the chimney. It was learned that the 2 injured suffered important wounds in their lower extremities. In this regard, the president of Cuba, Miguel Díaz-Canel, on his social network Twitter expressed, "We are aware of the accident occurred in the city Guterres, and we are also in constant communication with the authorities of Matanzas." U.S. President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris focused their attention on Friday on 3 Tennessee lawmakers targeted for expulsion from the state legislature over their support for gun control. According to a White House statement, President Joe Biden spoke over the phone with Tennessee's 3 and thanked them for their leadership in seeking to ban assault weapons. On the other hand, Vice President Kamala Harris arrived in Nashville, where she attended a rally at Fisk University and met with the 3 deputies targeted over the gun protests. Colombian authorities declared a state of public calamity before a possible eruption of the Nevado del Ruiz volcano following an increase in seismic activity. Different authorities in the Caldas department have accelerated the evacuations of families and towns near the volcano. The mayor's office of Manizales recorded some 200 families that remain in these high-risk areas. Nevertheless, some families have refused to evacuate. Meanwhile, the Colombian Ministry of National Defense affirmed that the Army continues evacuation work and has the necessary equipment to improve the routes in Villa María, Caldas, Santa Rosa de Cabal, and Risaralda amid the orange alert that is still in effect. Break. We'll be right back. Welcome back from the South. In France on Friday, demonstrators booed Prime Minister Elizabeth Borne in front of the hospital in Rhodes to demonstrate their opposition to the pension reform. While the head of the government was there to talk about health issues, David Guistot, Secretary General of the CGT Departmental Union of Aveyron, denounced a communication maneuver of the Prime Minister to make them move on to something other than the pension reform.
She comes here to talk about health when emergency services are threatened, maternity wards are threatened, laboratories are threatened. So coming here is a communication exercise to try to say, let's move on, let's talk about health. Except that on health, this government is also not up to the task because it does not provide the means. The desertification of the territories in terms of medical presence is impacted, and Aveyron is not spared. On the contrary, it is greatly impacted, and this puts entire populations in danger.
I am worn out by the working conditions, whether physical or psychological, because we are always asked for more with few resources.
In France, the Yellow Vest movements demonstrated against the national government's shipment of arms to Ukraine. Activists of the Yellow Vest movement expressed their rejection of this initiative, claiming that the authorities will ask the people to reduce spending in all areas while increasing the military budget by billions of euros to support the war industry, in addition to a war that does not take place on French territory. Russian anti-air defense shot down a Ukrainian missile over the Crimean Peninsula. Sergei Aksyonov, governor of the city of Feodosia on the peninsula, confirmed that the city's anti-air defense intercepted an incoming missile launched from Ukrainian territory. The official stressed that although the missile debris fell in the region, there were no casualties and no considerable damage to the city's infrastructure. Authorities warned that in the last weeks, the Ukrainian army tried several times to attack the infrastructure of the peninsula with drones. Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu and his Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, held a joint press conference in Ankara after a bilateral meeting.
We agree that obstacles to the export of Russian grain and fertilizer should be removed. There are efforts by Secretary General Antonio Guterres between the United Nations and the Russian Federation. As Turkey, we strongly support these efforts, most recently in New York. We had the opportunity to discuss with Secretary General Guterres what we can do to meet Russia's expectations. A step was taken to send Russia ammonia and fertilizer to African countries via some Western countries such as the Netherlands, Estonia and Latvia. But of course, the problem has not been completely solved. We have to express this. We have to be fair here. When we say this, they say, do you support Russia? No, we are not saying this because we support Russia. We already import grain and fertilizer from Russia. The important thing is that for this agreement to continue, for the export of grain and fertilizer from Ukraine to continue, the existing agreement must be implemented. That's what we are saying.
On the other hand, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov warns that Moscow could abandon the grain agreement with Ukraine if obstacles to Russian exports persist. Lavrov pointed out that Western responsibility for forcing Ukraine not to sit down at the negotiating table.
The Russian part of this package, which is provided for by a special memorandum between the United Nations and our country, is not being implemented at all. Both our Turkish friends and the initiator of this entire package, Mr. Guterres, the United Nations Secretary General, addressed the relevant calls and demands to Western countries, but all in vain. The daily statements from Kyiv, Brussels and Washington that on no account should the hostilities be stopped and the talks be started This contradicts their demands for Russia to stop the war and sit down at the negotiating table. We understand that these are all dirty tricks.
On Friday, U.S. President Joe Biden signed a warrant prolonging national emergency concerning sanctions against Russia over the situation in Ukraine. Through a statement, the U.S. head of state noted that the activities of the Russian government abroad continue to pose an unusual threat to the security of the country, which is why he extended for 1 year the state of emergency related to the sanctions. On Saturday, China's armed forces started military exercises in sea and airspace near Taiwan with the aim of protecting its territorial sovereignty. According to the authorities of the Eastern Theater Command of the Chinese Army, the military drills will be held from April 8th to the 10th and will take place in the Taiwan Strait, as well as in the sea and airspace north, south, and east of the Taiwan island. The command detailed that these exercises represent a warning to separatists and external forces. He also pointed out that the maneuvers are a necessary measure to protect the state sovereignty and territorial integrity of China. Meanwhile, separatist forces in Taiwan prepared joint intelligence, monitoring, and reconnaissance mechanisms and initiated drills of various kinds in response to the 3-day military exercises conducted by the Chinese military. The Chinese military drills were announced a day after Taiwan's chief administrator Tsai Ing-wen returned from Los Angeles, where she met with U.S. Speaker of the House of Representatives Kevin McCarthy. The meeting was described by Beijing as a provocation by Washington, ignoring the One China principle. teleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries through StarSat, dial 461, and enjoy Latin American alternative broadcasts. One final short break, and we'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back from the south. In Israel, at least 3 people were killed and 6 others were injured on Friday in an attack registered in the capital city of Tel Aviv. According to local media, the incident took place at a time when tensions in the region continued to rise after several days of clashes in the holiest site of occupied Jerusalem. In this context, the Israeli Foreign Ministry informed that the attack occurred on Friday on the Tayalet promenade when an unidentified subject opened fire against a group of tourists. The violence broke out after Israeli police raided the mosque this week, sparking riots in the disputed capital and outrage in the Arab world. In this context, Israeli occupation forces arbitrarily detained 15 Palestinians, including 3 minors, at the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. Human rights organizations pointed out that the Israeli persecution against Palestinians has intensified in the last weeks, while faithful celebrate the holy month of Ramadan. The government of Morocco condemned the actions of the Israeli police while calling on the authorities to respect the legal, religious, and historical status as well as the holy sites and the integrity of Palestine. Several Islamic countries rallied in support of the Muslim people and the sacred Al-Aqsa Mosque after the relentless Israeli harassment against the Palestinian people. In Jordan, several social organizations took to the streets of Amman to condemn the actions carried out by Israel against the Palestinians and Lebanon in the last few days. The community also urged the local authorities to expel the Israeli ambassador and close its diplomatic mission in the capital. Rwanda marked the 29th anniversary of the genocide against the Tutsi ethnic group in a ceremony held at the National Memorial of Gisozi in Kigali. As every year on April 7th, an official ceremony organized at the Gisozi National Memorial marks the beginning of the 100 days of commemoration. The genocide occurred between April 7th and July 15th, 1994, during the Rwandan Civil War. During this period of around 100 days, members of the Tutsi minority ethnic group, as well as some moderate Hutu and Twa, were killed by armed Hutu militias.
We gather to honor the continued sacrifice of survivors and remember all those we lost during the genocide against the Tutsi. But Rwandans, I thank all of you for refusing to be defined by this tragic history. We cannot, however, ignore the fact that things like violence and hate speech persist not so far away from here.
More than 14,000 migrants were intercepted in the first 3 months of the year in Tunisia while trying to reach European coast in unsafe boats. The Coast Guard found more than 500 irregular migration attempts and intercepted or rescued 14,400 people, of which only 1,200 were Tunisian citizens. Specialists say the increase in arrivals of sub-Saharan migrants follows statements by Tunisian President Kais Saied about a plot to change the country's demography and Arab-Muslim identity. The Iranian embassy in Syria distributed humanitarian aid to refugees and Palestinian resistance forces in the country during Ramadan. The Iranian embassy made the delivery of basic foodstuff and essential goods to the Al-Yarmouk camp. This action seeks to soften the impact of the sanctions imposed on Damascus, which have caused serious difficulties and negatively affected the daily lives of the Palestinian refugees. The embassy pointed out that they hope to send a message of solidarity with the Palestinian people. A military tribunal in the Democratic Republic of the Congo sentenced 6 men to life in prison on Friday for murdering Italy's ambassador in 2021. The defendants, who were arrested in January 2022, denied any wrongdoing and said their initial confessions were extracted through torture. Their lawyers also argued that the prosecution had failed to offer evidence in support of the murder charges and pushed for acquittal. We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.